September 11th, 2006. 5 years after 9/11, where things stand, Osama bin Laden's still out there. A new generation of Al-Qaeda, stronger, better equipped, with one goal.
To kill as many American men, women, and children as they can.
Tonight, we go inside America's new nerve center, where terrorists are tracked. And up in the air, a powerful eye in the sky.
Sunglasses, shorts, a red shirt.
They don't even know we're looking at them?
But after all the money, all the lost lives, a Brian Ross undercover investigation shows just how easy it is to buy bomb ingredients. Enough to bring down a building. What remains to be done to make America safe? And why, after 5 years, hasn't it happened?
They will strike. There's no question about it.
From ABC News, this is a special edition of Prime Time, 9/11/06, Where Things Stand. Reporting now from New York, Charles Gibson.
Good evening. Last night and tonight, you have seen a movie about how we got to 9/11. The movie took us back. We are not unaware of the controversy surrounding the film you just saw, and a bit later, we're going to invite your comments on the film. But for the next 40 minutes, we want to look at where we've come in 5 years. In that time, billions of dollars have been spent to prevent further terrorism. Tens of millions of words have been written about how safe we as a nation really are. Where do things stand? A new ABC News poll finds that nearly 8 in 10 of us say 9/11 changed our personal outlook in a lasting and profound way. It changed the way we see the skyline of a city, and it changed the way we look at life. The questions we're going to explore tonight: how have we been spending our money to combat terrorism, and what have our dollars bought? Are we doing everything we can, truly, to prevent terrorism? And then, can we find Osama bin Laden, and would that really make any difference? Some of the answers you'll hear tonight, I suspect, may surprise you. And we start with our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, who for 5 years has been on the story of the hunt for Osama bin Laden.
Wherever bin Laden and company are hiding, officials say they seem to be paying close attention to what's going on in the world, most likely by listening to the BBC World Service.
With nothing more than a transistor radio, you can remain very well informed.
And officials believe the world's most wanted terrorist is no longer confined to mountainous caves.
I would imagine that he would be living fairly comfortably in a compound, and that he would have access to outside information.
Few people know more about the hunt for bin Laden than Robert Grenier, the just-retired head of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center.
I was really responsible for all of CIA's involvement in the war on terror.
Grenier showed us his best guess as to bin Laden's current whereabouts.
I'd say probably somewhere north of the Khyber Pass and south of Chitral. It's an area in which the Pakistani government has very little penetration. For the most part, that is an area which is populated by people who are very sympathetic to the radical Islamist cause.
And if a tribal leader is in fact his host, what does that provide bin Laden in terms of protection?
It provides him with a built-in early warning system. A potential external threat would be telegraphed to bin Laden and those who are immediately surrounding him.
Bin Laden's number 2 man, Ayman al-Zawahiri, is more active and therefore considered more vulnerable. His videotape statement released today was his 12th of the year. In it, he called on Muslims everywhere to take revenge on America. Zawahiri is now regarded as the operational head of Al-Qaeda, the organizer of new attacks.
And he is, in many ways, the key to Al-Qaeda, much more so than Osama.
ABC News consultant Alexei Deba spent the last 2 months talking to Pakistani officials about the hunt for Zawahiri.
They have located him within a 40-square-kilometer area. They know who's protecting him. They know roughly how he circulates, how he operates, and they feel fairly confident that they are going to get Zawahiri in a matter of months.
But it is in the teeming cities of Pakistan where officials say most of Al-Qaeda's killers can be found, including 2 men from America. One is former Californian Adam Gaddan, now a regular feature on Al-Qaeda videotapes.
Whatever was going to happen would happen outside America, like every other major jihadi operation.
Over the weekend, he described his glee on learning of the 9/11 attacks on his own country.
I personally thought that the major attack, which everyone was talking about, would take place somewhere in the Islamic region, like the Arabian Peninsula, for instance. It never crossed my mind that something might happen on enemy soil.
And Gadan praised the hijackers, shown on the tape, training for their mission.
All the brothers who took part in the raids on America were dedicated, strong-willed, highly motivated individuals. They were definitely not failures looking for a way out.
Also believed to be helping plan attacks on the U.S. is this former Florida resident, Adnan El-Shukr Juma. Only a few years ago, he was a student at a community college in Broward County. Now, the FBI has offered a $5 million reward for his capture.
Shukr Juma is a dangerous individual. He's a trained Al-Qaeda operative.
The U.S. has distributed these matchboxes in Pakistan, advertising the reward for Shukr Juma. The FBI thinks he scouted targets in Houston, Chicago, Washington, and New York before fleeing to Pakistan.
It's our theory that he was conducting surveillance runs and collecting information to be used by Al-Qaeda for whatever their intentions are at any given time.
With two men who lived in America advising on targets, the top two leaders at large, and thousands of militant recruits available, Al-Qaeda remains a fearful force. Senior intelligence officials in Washington and London have told us in the last week that almost certainly another attempted strike is coming, Charlie.
Our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, who will be back with us later in the broadcast. And we'll be right back.
Coming up, a hidden camera report. Watch how easy it is to buy bomb-making ingredients.
I need to get 3 or 4 bags of ammonium nitrate.
Okay. 3 or 4.
We bought enough to blow up a building. Why didn't anyone care? Brian Ross is back with an undercover investigation. 9/11/06, where things stand. We'll continue in a moment. 9/11/06, where things stand continues. Once again, Charles Gibson.
9/11 was above all an intelligence failure. A failure to, in a phrase we've heard so many times, connect the dots. Well, one of the key recommendations of the 9/11 Commission was the creation of a new agency, the National Counterterrorism Center. Its mission, identify every dot and look for every possible connection. It was built at a cost of $700 million. ABC's Pierre Thomas was granted rare access to the center's secret command post.
You're looking at the nerve center of the nation's war on terror, where every available technology is used to track Al-Qaeda. It did not exist before 9/11. It's all been built to stop terrorists who have a single goal:
to kill as many American men, women, and children as they can, as they themselves die.
It's 8 a.m. and Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and FBI Director Robert Mueller are on their way to the White House to brief the president. Law enforcement officials are under more pressure than ever after the intelligence failures of 9/11. Billions have been spent in the largest government overhaul in U.S. history. But has the government truly learned from past mistakes? Republican Senator Charles Grassley is not convinced.
It's some better, but it's not good enough to stop another 9/11.
Perhaps the government's greatest blunder before 9/11 was the failure to share information. In the days leading up to the attacks, the CIA did not tell the FBI 2 Al-Qaeda members were in the country. They turned out to be hijackers.
The pain, the hurt, the grief, you come away from that with the belief that you never want that to happen again, and you will do anything you can to make sure that it does not.
The National Counterterrorism Center, housed at a secret location outside of Washington, was created to force the nation's 16 intelligence agencies to work together. Don Lauren is deputy director.
Each person has access to all the different agencies' information, which is something unique in the history of information sharing and cooperation. And I believe this is a direct result from 9/11.
24 hours a day, analysts from the various agencies work side by side in this space without walls. They produce what may be the government's most critical daily report, this book, the top-secret threat matrix, which contains the latest terrorism intelligence. The matrix is the subject of 3 secure video conference calls held here to launch investigations to determine if the threats are real.
You want to make sure that you're doing everything possible. You go home at night thinking about, what were those dots that I didn't connect? What else do I need to know? What should I have done that I didn't do?
John Brennan, the former head of the center, remembers the pressure. A 25-year CIA veteran, Brennan says while improvements have been made, duplication among agencies remains. And he says John Negroponte, the nation's new intelligence director, has yet to fully focus counterterrorism efforts.
It's an additional layer of bureaucracy. There still needs to be more streamlining of the intelligence community.
Tim Romer, a member of the 9/11 Commission, says the intelligence director's office may now be part of the problem.
It's getting way too big. It's twice as big as it should be, and it's hiring some of the same people with the pre-9/11 mindset.
And some members of Congress are convinced infighting still remains. Jane Harmon is the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee.
Old cultures die hard, and as I've often said, the dirtiest 4-letter word in government is spelled T-U-R-F.
The federal government is being forced to change its culture, and perhaps no agency has been under greater scrutiny than the FBI. Every morning, the FBI director and the Attorney General begin their day discussing the terrorism threats that developed overnight.
Each morning, what's the volume of threats? Is it high, and how many are serious? The matrix we get has anywhere from, what would you say, 10 to 15 pages generally. But it's threats not just the United States, but threats against the United States interests around the world as well.
To deal with those threats, Mueller has radically restructured the FBI, tripling the number of agents designated to fight terrorism. Intelligence analysts and linguists have nearly doubled. Before 9/11, Bureau leaders ignored warnings from their own agents about suspected Islamic radicals learning to fly planes. Today, every lead is run down.
We've taken a lot of measures to ensure that those mistakes do not occur. And I think we've taken steps to make it much more difficult for the enemy to hurt America.
But former FBI counterterrorism investigator Jack Clunan fears agents are now overworked and micromanaged.
Everything you do is second-guessed. If you spend all your time writing paper and spending all your time answering questions, and you're not out there building the informant network, the public is at jeopardy.
There are other challenges for the FBI. The agency is racing to update its technology. Many computer systems are online, but the Bureau spent $170 million for a database that did not work.
Terrorists have better equipment, better technology than our own government has, and they can run circles around us.
If you had to give them a grade, A through F, what would you give them?
C-, and maybe 5 years ago, I would have given them a D.
Every one of the suggestions that are made for improvement of the FBI, we have pursued and followed up on.
What say you to them when they say change is not coming fast enough?
I'll be the first one to say we still got a ways to go, but we've made remarkable strides in protecting the American public since September 11th.
But everyone admits our enemies are as committed and as dangerous as ever.
This is a movement, it's a philosophy. This is a critical juncture in history. It's not just an organization we're fighting. There are thousands of people, if not hundreds and perhaps millions, who feel that the United States is their enemy. They will strike. There's no question about it.
The question is, when they do, will we be ready?
Intelligence is critical. For all the screening machines, cameras, helicopters, and terrorism centers, good intelligence and interpretation of that intelligence beats them all. Joining us now, the current FBI spokesman and former ABC News correspondent John Miller, and former White House counterterrorism chief Richard Clark, who is now an ABC News consultant. Both, you may remember, were featured in that controversial ABC docudrama about 9/11. And as I said earlier, the movie is not our focus in this hour, but we are interested in what you think about the movie. And we hope you'll post your comments on our website. Dick has some very definite thoughts about the film, which are there at abcnews.com, and that's where you can post your thoughts. But let me talk to you both. And John Miller, let me start with you. There has been no attack for the last 5 years. Have we been lucky, or are we good?
Well, I think, as the director likes to say, you make your own luck. The harder you work, the luckier you get. But I think it's more important to note that in the past 12 months, not the 5 years since September 11th, but in the last year alone, leveraging intelligence, working with local law enforcement partners, working with international partners, we have stopped 5 terrorist attacks in the planning stages for execution on U.S. soil. The case in Torrance, California, targeting locations in Los Angeles. The Atlanta individuals looking to target locations in Washington, D.C., who were connected to the terrorist plot in Canada, and individuals overseas in other countries. In Miami, that self-styled group that was trying to plot attacks on U.S. soil and looking to make contact with Al-Qaeda. A plot against the PATH trains under the tunnels in New York City, as well as working with our colleagues in Canada and Great Britain, of course, on that latest plot involving planes. That shows 2 things. One, that shows there is a very high level of tempo in terms of the enemy's work, including homegrown cells, and that we're doing a lot of things right.
So, Dick Clark, if the attack had come, if one of those attacks that John mentioned had been successful, we'd be blaming the president. The fact that attacks haven't come, should we give him the credit?
Well, we should give the president and the entire bureaucracy some credit. But the thing is, we shouldn't rest on our laurels. As long as there are people out there, thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, who want to kill Americans and who, in fact, are willing to die in the process, and as long as we have vulnerabilities here, like the subways, like the container ships, like the chemical plants, that we haven't fixed, if you add up intent of the bad guys and vulnerability of our own people, eventually there will be another attack.
I was struck by the tape released by the #2 man in Al-Qaeda today, al-Zawahiri, and he said the next attacks will be in the Persian Gulf nations or in Israel. Is that because they want to go there, or is it because the U.S. is something of a hardened target now?
Well, I think what he says really doesn't matter, because I'm not sure he's running an organization anymore. Al-Qaeda has changed from being a hierarchical organization, as it was on September 11th, to being, as John just said, a bunch of self-starters, spontaneous cells in England and Germany and elsewhere, and about a dozen groups around the world that are kind of franchises of the old Al-Qaeda. So it's a movement, it's a philosophy, and as many times as you arrest them, there are going to be more of them.
Let me get a quick answer from you both, because you were both involved for so long before 2001 in following terrorism. John, you as a reporter, Dick, you as a counterterrorism official. And we always talk about failure of imagination. But John, were you surprised on this day 5 years ago?
I was surprised at the scale of it. I really felt that we were going to get hit somewhere. I wasn't expecting U.S. soil, and I certainly wasn't expecting anything that large or creative. I don't think anybody was.
And Dick?
No, I think we knew something was coming. We'd been saying it for months. We thought it could be in the United States. There wasn't a failure of imagination. There was a failure of implementation.
Is there any failure of imagination now? Or at least, if we can't prevent it, have we thought of everything?
I think we've thought of too much. The pendulum has swung to the other extreme. We now have 1,000 scenarios, and we need to have priorities. And most importantly, we need to fix things.
And John, quick response to that?
I am always impressed every day I come to work at the imagination and creativity, the things that they're looking at and thinking of and gaming. I think we're in the right direction, but I got to echo what Dick said. We can't rest on our laurels. The idea that we're preventing them doesn't mean that there isn't one that'll fly under the radar screen or some self-starter cell that will get by. We've learned that from the Israelis and the Brits, who have had that experience themselves, even though they do very well.
John Miller, thanks ever so much. Dick Clark, as always, thank you as well. And we'll be back in a moment.
Why aren't we safer? A Brian Ross undercover investigation. Look how easy it was for us to get bomb-making ingredients.
We went in and we bought enough ammonium nitrate to make a bomb. Absolutely no questions asked.
The failure to reform, still ahead. When 9/11/06, Where Things Stand, continues.
You are looking at a live picture of the New York skyline tonight. And emanating from the spot where the World Trade Center towers stood, 2 beams of light reaching for the sky. They are illuminated only on the rarest of occasions. But if you are from this city, or indeed if you are from anywhere else in the world and you see them, it gives you chills. We've become painfully aware that there are an awful lot of ways that terrorists can get to us. Chemical attack, dirty bomb, suicide bomber. Brian Ross and his investigative team decided to test just one method, the simplest notion, an ammonium nitrate bomb.
This undercover videotape was made by ABC News over the summer at a storage shed just a few miles from the White House. 3 people unloading a half-ton, 1,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate, a chemical fertilizer that in the wrong hands is one of the world's most dangerous bomb-making materials.
Ammonium nitrate is a weapon of choice for terrorists. It's very simple to use, very easy to obtain, and is a real threat to the American people.
Ammonium nitrate has been used around the world in devastating terror attacks. From the trains in India this summer, to the disco in Bali, Indonesia, to the Oklahoma City Federal Building, where 168 people died, including 19 children. Yet, as a widely used fertilizer, it is easily and cheaply purchased at farm supply and gardening stores around the country. There is no federal law restricting or even requiring registration of who can buy it. No background checks required.
When you're talking about something as lethal as ammonium nitrate, we have to have controls in place.
But efforts in Congress to require controls, background checks for buyers, have repeatedly failed, blocked by lobbyists for American farmers, the Farm Bureau, according to Congressman Pete King, the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee.
I mean, Farm Bureau is a powerful lobby. You know, they're looking out for what they think is the best interest of their members. I think they're making the mistake of not seeing the impact this has on the country and the world as a whole.
With still no laws controlling who can buy ammonium nitrate, it's as easy as it could be to acquire lethal quantity. The people unloading it at this warehouse were part of an ABC News undercover team, including college journalism students who were fellows with the nonprofit Carnegie Corporation.
Yeah, hey, you guys carry ammonium nitrate.
The students spent the summer at ABC News tracking the laws and the history of ammonium nitrate as a weapon of terror. It's something that terrorists already know a lot about. Al-Qaeda has even produced an online video showing step-by-step how to use ammonium nitrate to make bombs. We started our undercover buying at a farm supply store in Wendell, North Carolina.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I need to get 3 or 4 bags of ammonium nitrate. Okay.
A brochure put out by the fertilizer industry encourages farm stores to identify your customers by requiring a government-issued photo ID. That did not happen here or at any of the other locations where we bought ammonium nitrate.
8 bags of ammonium nitrate.
Farm stores also claim they are on the alert for people who pay in cash and don't want the fertilizer delivered. Our students paid in cash and said they take it away themselves.
The thing that's probably the most astounding about it all was that there were absolutely no questions asked.
The owner of the store later told us his employees should have done a better job of checking, but that they are not required to do so by law. We got 8 50-pound bags of ammonium nitrate loaded into the back of our truck. 400 pounds.
To put that into perspective, the Valley bombings overseas in Indonesia used about 210 pounds of this stuff.
Proposed federal laws would have made it illegal for a stranger to show up and drive away with a truck full of the material. But Congressman King says he's had to settle for a watered-down version of a bill with no background checks for buyers to get it through his committee without the Farm Bureau blocking it.
And I had to make the decision as committee chairman to have a bill which was pretty good or to have no bill at all. But I'll tell you, I wish it was stronger.
The Farm Bureau lobbyists, operating out of fancy new offices just down the street from the Capitol, say background checks to buy ammonium nitrate would be a burden for farmers.
Background checks would definitely be something that would cause many of the folks I work for a hard time.
Rebecca Adcock is the Director of Congressional Relations for the Farm Bureau.
But what's wrong with that, given the potential misuse of and danger of this material?
Well, I'll tell you what the skepticism is for, first of all, we've never had a problem with a small local retailer who probably knows who's buying his ammonium nitrate from him anyway.
Right now, do you think that a stranger could walk into an agricultural store with cash and buy ammonium nitrate?
I think that if he was in Middle America, it would be unlikely.
Not based on what we found. At 4 separate stores in North Carolina and Virginia, strangers with cash had no problem getting enough ammonium nitrate to cause major destruction. At 3 stores, clerks did ask for names, but never asked for driver's licenses or any sort of identification. In less than 48 hours' time, we had loaded a rental truck with 1,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate and drove it into the Washington, D.C. area, where we stored the material for more than a month, never once challenged.
That surprised you?
Yeah, it's a little surprising.
Was this far too easy?
In my opinion, it probably shouldn't have happened that way.
It should not have happened.
Those people should have been asked some questions.
What's happening with ammonium nitrate is just one of a number of examples since September 11th, where laws proposed to make the country safer, including recommendations made by the 9/11 Commission, have been successfully blocked by lobbyists for special interests. Proposals to inspect 100% of all shipping containers for radiological or nuclear material are strongly opposed by Walmart and other big retailers. Their lobbyist says big retailers have improved their own security, and inspecting all of their containers would unnecessarily delay foreign goods from reaching store shelves by several days.
Anytime you have a delay, and particularly an extended one, it increases cost. And so...
Even a few days?
Mm-hmm. Even a few days. Even a few days. And in the movement of cargo in the global supply chain, I hate to use the phrase, but time is money.
Laws that would require inspections of all cargo shipped on passenger jets are also being blocked, to the dismay of Congressman Ed Markey.
Every passenger should be given a card as they're getting on board a plane that says, warning, the cargo under your feet has not been screened for a bomb, although your bags have.
But the American Chamber of Commerce says screening all cargo on passenger planes would slow down express shipping of priority items.
We are creating bottlenecks where we need not.
But given the current security threat, isn't that a small price to pay?
We're looking at $52 billion worth of commerce that is moving here in a time frame so that it will get to our doorsteps when we would like it.
And finally, there's one of the 9/11 Commission's strongest recommendations.
I have no radio contact with anybody else at this time.
A dedicated broadcast frequency by next year to help overcome the communications problems police and fire had at the World Trade Center, where many never heard the order to evacuate.
Division trying to transmit. Be advised, you're totally unreadable. The radio is not coming in.
Going on Charlie and 10, black and alive.
Television station owners, including ABC, have agreed to turn over the frequency, but don't want to do it until 2009, arguing some 75 stations would lose big chunks of their audience.
It's really, frankly, a damning testimony about the system and the influence of special interests here in Washington.
The broadcasters say they provide an important public service, too.
I think we're putting lives at risk if you have a premature cutoff of over-the-air television service. Because I do
That's
believe,
putting lives at risk?
Well, I do, well, yes.
More than having the police and the fire with bad radios?
I think you can put thousands of people's lives at risk if during an emergency situation that information doesn't get out there.
Why are we waiting to save lives when we are literally putting the lives of our bravest Americans at risk, as well as other innocent Americans?
All of us have to be inconvenienced, whether it's the airport or if you're a farmer going to purchase fertilizer. There are some inconveniences we have to accept in the post-9/11 world in which we live.
So added to the question, are we safer, is the question, why aren't we safer? In the case of the bomb-making fertilizer, ammonium nitrate, the Farm Bureau supports the watered-down version, and it is expected to be voted on by the full House sometime this fall, Charlie.
Again, ABC's Brian Ross, our thanks, and we'll be right back. Anniversaries are singular things, a time for remembering what happened on a day years ago. Anniversaries divisible by 5 usually get more attention than most, and so there has been a great deal of attention to this day. We've had extensive news and press coverage of this anniversary, movies, disputes about the movies. We've had remembrances, wreath layings, church services, and the like, all worthwhile. But you wonder why we need the anniversary for all this, because there really isn't a day that goes by when we don't remember. Indeed, we can't forget. Terrorism is no longer something that just happens to them. We realize every day now that it can happen to us, to folks who just go to work or get on a plane. Something is fundamentally different in everyone's mind. And now putting your child on a school bus or driving across a bridge or just going to the mall, each of these things is a small act of courage. And peril is a part of everyday life. You don't need an anniversary to think about that. We've all internalized it and learned to live with uncertainty. It happened 5 years ago today. And yet, it seems as if it happened just yesterday. We thank you very much for joining us tonight. We hope you'll remember Nightline later tonight. I'm Charlie Gibson, and for all of us at ABC News, good night.
(9/11/06), Where Things Stand, has been a presentation of ABC News.
I'm Tim Miller in North Knoxville. A company reflects on their hard work clearing debris from the World Trade Center.
Reflections on travel 5 years to the day after the September 11th terror attacks. I'm Adam Longo at McGee Tyson Airport. Hear what travelers are saying just ahead.
Live from everybody, 5 years ago tonight, the nation reeling from the worst terror attacks in history.
Today, the horrors of September 11th, 2001 were summoned up again in a flood of emotions. Loved ones were mourned at memorials nationwide. The most emotional were those held where the victims died. ABC's Stephanie Tsai reports from Ground Zero in New York.
Cesar Amoranto Albiar, we all love and miss you so much, especially your new grandchildren.
This year, the reading of names was a story of love interrupted. Spouses, fiancés, and life partners read out the 2,749 names of those killed in the World Trade Center attack.
And honey, I want you to have a happy Grandparents' Day in heaven.
5 years ago, the ground they stand on today was covered in mountains of debris. For the first time on an anniversary, 9/11 families were invited to walk into the bowels of what were the Twin Towers. They left roses and messages, tears and prayers.
Police Officer Moira Smith did not survive that day. And the world is a less safe, less fun, and a less caring place because of it.
At the Pentagon, a solemn ceremony honoring the 184 victims that were killed when a third hijacked plane struck the seat of American defense. And at a once anonymous field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, President Bush made one of 3 stops of the day, laying a wreath at the site where United Flight 93 crashed. Back at Ground Zero, the grim listing of names was concluding hours later.
May our grandchildren and the generations after us are born into a world where they won't have to stand here ever.
5 years on, and Ground Zero is still an empty construction pit. Today, a visual reflection of what a lot of people are feeling. In Lower Manhattan, Stephanie Tsai, ABC News.
Well, the president concluded his September 11th observances tonight with a televised address from the Oval Office. President reminding Americans that Osama bin Laden is still at large, along with many other terrorists.
Osama bin Laden and other terrorists are still in hiding. Our message to them is clear. No matter how long it takes, America will find you, and we will bring you to justice.
Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda released a new videotape to coincide with the anniversary of 9/11. Al Jazeera is airing the tape, which says the U.S. shouldn't waste time reinforcing troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda's #2 man says, quote, their fate is doomed. He also warns about new terrorist strikes, but doesn't say anything specific. The CIA says more than 5,000 terrorists have been captured or killed since the 9/11 attacks. Among them, the most wanted terrorist in Iraq, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. He was killed back in June when the U.S. military dropped 2 500-pound bombs on his hideout. The hunt continues for the world's most wanted terrorist, Osama bin Laden. U.S. officials believe bin Laden is somewhere along the Afghan-Pakistan border.
While the shock and grief over the 9/11 attacks were just setting in for Americans in the world, the cleanup had to begin. 6 News reporter Tim Miller shows you how one local company's work made a difference.
This is the main piece of equipment used to clear debris at Ground Zero. It's called the grapple excavator. Here at Phillips and Jordan Incorporated in North Knoxville, they're remembering 10 months of hard work starting just 2 days after 9/11.
And just went, man, I can't believe it's been 5 years ago.
For 321 days after the Twin Towers fell, Teddy Phillips, his staff, and several local contractors cleared debris and came up with a plan on how to sift through it. As the holder of the federal government's disaster contract, Jordan and Phillips Incorporated decided to ferry the debris to the Staten Island landfill. They went through it all piece by piece, 1.6 million tons of debris, and recovered body parts, rings, pictures, and other personal belongings.
That has been an experience I'll never, ever forget, because we did bring a lot of things back to families, had a lot of closure on our efforts up there.
The cleanup many expected to take 2 years took this East Tennessee company only 10 months. More than 4,000 human remains were found.
That was something that we've never been involved in anything like that for. Hopefully we never will again.
Big projects are nothing new for Phillips and Jordan. They helped clean up after Hurricane Andrew in Florida in 1992, also helped clean up from Hurricane Ivan, and are still in New Orleans with that huge project left behind by Hurricane Katrina. In North Knoxville, Tim Miller, 6 News.
Right here in Knoxville, hundreds took time out of their day to remember the victims of 9/11. Around a dozen area mayors attended the ceremony at the 9/11 Memorial in downtown Knoxville, outside the city-county building. They placed wreaths at the site and gave flowers, as you see there, to local families of victims of the attacks. Also in Knoxville, rural Metro firefighters honored the 340 New York City firefighters who lost their lives on September 11th. They planned the event to coincide with the time the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. As they read the names of the firefighters who died that day, the flags in front of all 14 rural Metro fire stations were lowered to half-staff.
In other news today, guilty pleas for the husband and wife owners of some well-known Market Square businesses. Scott West pleading guilty today to distributing nearly 1,000 kilos of marijuana and laundering millions of dollars in the process. His wife Bernadette West also pleading guilty to money laundering. As part of his plea, West turns ownership of Preservation Pub and Earth to Old City to his sister. He now faces up to 7 years in prison, though his attorney is hoping to knock that down. Bernadette West is looking at 3 to 5 years in prison.
An apartment fire this afternoon put a dozen families out of their homes. The fire started around 1 at the Cambridge Arms Apartments in West Knoxville. The Knoxville Fire Department says plumbers were working on copper piping when it started a fire in an apartment wall. That wall connected 4 units. The Red Cross has helped 7 families with food and clothing, and a local motel is providing lodging tonight.
Well, we have a traffic alert to pass on to you for this week. KUB will be shutting down the Mineral Springs and Walker Avenue intersection for sewer main upgrades this week. The intersection will be closed from 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, and then 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. each day. The closure began today and will continue through the rest of the week.
Well, only 5 years after the terrorist attacks in September 11th is such a somber day, but people still take to the air and still fly. We talked with passengers traveling on this tragic anniversary, including a woman who knew a victim. And we'll take a look at a unique ceremony. Hundreds of volunteers come together to celebrate America.
Turned out to be a beautiful day here in East Tennessee. A few isolated showers and thunderstorms develop, but as we scan live the skies of East Tennessee, live Viper 6 showing no precipitation, just a little bit of moisture in the atmosphere around the radar site there in Morristown. Temperatures in the low to mid 60s expected by early in the morning. And once we get past that, our rain chances will be on the increase. We'll talk more about that with 6 predictors straight ahead.
From the Twin Towers that once stood to now a live picture tonight from New York City. You can see the beams of light shooting into the sky. The World Trade Center tribute in light in the sky above Manhattan to mark the place where the Twin Towers once stood.
Well, right now, Ground Zero is a bare 16-acre shell, but in just 5 years, it could look very much different. The new Freedom Tower will stand some 1,776 feet above the ground, and a permanent memorial for the victims is set to open in just 3 years. And you can make a donation by going to buildthememorial.org. You can find a link to that site on our website at WATE.com.
And 184 lights illuminate the sky above the Pentagon, and they commemorate September 11th and the 184 people who lost their lives there.
The terror attacks also changing the world's economy, reducing global growth, pummeling industries, and costing billions of dollars. The government spent $7 billion compensating victims' families. It cost more than $575 million to reconstruct the Pentagon. And the tragedy at Ground Zero generating more than $34 billion in insurance claims, increasing premiums by 5%. Experts say global oil prices now include a $6 to $10 per barrel terror premium. American businesses can spend up to $250 billion a year more on security for their operations and their employees.
The anniversary of a tragedy like September 11th can be triggers for depression and other emotional disorders. Doctors say even a change in weather can bring on symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. For some, the date of an anniversary may prompt the problem, but for others, it could be as simple as a change in the season. Doctors say to look out for post-traumatic stress symptoms like anxiety or panic attacks, and you may feel like you're losing control. Other symptoms include nightmares and difficulty sleeping and concentrating. While counseling and medication may help, doctors say the biggest step toward recovery is simply time.
More than 1,000 people in Virginia found a unique way to remember the victims of September 11th today. 1,200 volunteers formed a human flag at Mount Trashmore in Virginia Beach. The volunteers each held red, white, and blue cardboard pieces during a moment of silence at 8:46 this morning.
Well, September 11th, it will always be remembered as a tragic day. There are signs that life does go on. Hear from passengers who took to the skies 5 years after the attacks. They are not afraid to fly. And it's a groundbreaking day for NASA as the space shuttle returns to the space station to make an addition. We've got the latest on Atlantis.
We're in good shape tonight, and we'll be in good shape this weekend. The question is, what happens in between? The weekend forecast at this early hour looks great as of tonight, but that could change. Hopefully not. Details are coming up in the complete forecast.
Coming up only on Nightline, my co-anchor Terry Moran will be live from Afghanistan for the 5th anniversary of 9/11. Also from here in New York, I have a report on the small hospital where so many of the wounded came in the aftermath of the attacks.
On this 5-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, you're looking at a live picture of the New York City skyline, dramatically different from just 5 years ago without the Twin Towers dominating that skyline.
September 11th marks the darkest day in U.S. commercial aviation history. But no matter what day it is, signs of the times are everywhere. New at 11, 6 News reporter Adam Longo uncovers the emotions of today's travelers.
One of the biggest changes in our country post 9/11, obviously coming right here at our nation's airports. Travelers here at McGee-Tyson tonight reflecting on the past 5 years of aviation and airport advancements and if they feel any more or less safe in the skies.
Used to be the sky cap was the only greeting you got at the airport doors. Nowadays in the terminal and on the doors, you can't escape it.
That's not a lot of fun these days, and don't enjoy flying, like we used to.
Ed Ristow and his wife are just trying to get home.
Very frustrating at times, and especially today. We can't get out of here like we were supposed to.
No security delays tonight. It's the weather slowing things down, and no one we met gave a second thought to flying today.
I knew one flight attendant that was killed in the crash, and very somber day. But I'm not afraid to fly. We have to go about with our normal business and do what we need to do.
Frankly, I hadn't thought too much about it. We had to go, and so we're traveling.
A little weary, but not too much. I feel like I got stuff under control pretty well.
Here's what the nation's airports looked like in the days right after 9/11, deserted. Changes since then with a thumbs up from travelers.
I think the things that they've done have made us safer. It's just inconvenient.
I think we're doing the best that we can And I do think it is much safer to fly today than it was 5 years ago.
The flags, half-staff outside the terminal tell the story. 9/11 in our past, but not forgotten. At McGee-Tyson tonight, Adam Longo, 6 News.
Mother Nature is stirring up some trouble tonight. Hurricane Florence passing by Bermuda. The Category 1 hurricane packing 90-mile-an-hour winds did not make a direct hit, but high winds are still bending trees and damaging rooftops. Tourists trapped on the island are waiting out the near miss in their hotels. Power is still on, but 25-foot waves have flooded the streets, making them impassable.
And now we have a new tropical storm, Gordon, who is going to basically follow the same track as Florence, so no threat to the United States. Looks like that'll stay out into the ocean. We did have some spotty showers and thunder showers in East Tennessee today. Here's some estimated rainfall totals, a quarter inch over on the plateau. Look at that northeast of Maryville, 3/4 of an inch, and that's to 1.5 inches in parts of Claiborne County, and pretty decent amount of rain in parts of Granger County and Jefferson County, but not a whole lot in Knox County. It remains high and dry across East Tennessee at this hour, but we expect that to change as we go over the next couple of days, because chimes are changing. As you look at Live Viper 6 scanning the skies of East Tennessee, we do expect to pick up more showers and thunderstorms in and around the area as we go through later tomorrow afternoon. Let's check it out on 6 Predictor, which tells us tomorrow's weather today. First of all, we're going to look at the precipitation chances overnight remain very much on the slim side, and so I think we'll basically be dry with a few clouds here and there. Now, as we work through the day tomorrow, a cool front works its way from the west, and so we could see a gradual increase in showers and thunder showers. I don't think everybody's going to be wet by any means tomorrow, but the farther you live west or closer to the front, the better chance you have of this. And then Tuesday night into Wednesday, that's our best chance. Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, best chance for showers and storms, and that'll linger part of the day on Wednesday, and hopefully drying it out as we get into Wednesday night, setting the stage for a very nice forecast late in the week. We're going to go ahead and check our instant weather net site, see what the temperatures are right now around East Tennessee. At Roane State at 69, same thing at the Knoxville Zoo, over Gatlinburg 66, Dollywood Hardy 63, 67 at the Museum of Appalachia, Blunt Memorial 72, and still close to 70 out west at Roane State and the Millers Building in downtown Knoxville. Air quality forecast for you Tuesday. It's the 12th. We're back into the code yellow category for some fine particles floating in the atmosphere. Unusually sensitive people may want to limit those outdoor activities. We're going to see the temperature on the plateau in the morning close to 64 degrees. You'll notice a few more clouds, and some of you will get wet, especially in the afternoon on the plateau, a high of 78. South breezes at 5 to 10. As we head on over to the mountains, you'll be mostly cloudy. Could see some showers develop later in the day, but I think it'll wait till most of the day being dry. South breezes, 76 again for the mountains. And here in Knoxville, we'll start the day dry. About 30% coverage tomorrow afternoon, and those chances even increase more tomorrow night and into Wednesday itself. Once we get this front to get out of here, showers and storms likely Wednesday, keeping temperatures down. And if the moisture gets out of here in time, look at Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with cool nights, lots of sunshine, low humidity, and temperatures that'll be just at or slightly below normal Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that would be nice. I think there's a game coming up this weekend here in town.
A pretty big one.
Yeah, but that's at night, and it'll be nice and cool. Hopefully, we've been very lucky with our weather during high school and Saturday games
We
as
have.
well.
Let's knock on some wood.
Go for it.
All right.
Yes.
I think you just did.
Whatever works.
All right, Space Shuttle Atlantis successfully docking tonight with the International Space Station after a rocky takeoff Saturday. Atlantis bringing the station its first upgrades in more than 3 years. Now, before docking, the ship's commander turned the ship 60 degrees so that the space station's crew could photograph its damaged underside. NASA says a thruster cover came off just seconds after the shuttle's takeoff, but apparently causing no damage. This is the first addition to the space station since the Columbia disaster back in 2003.
Time for sports, and it's back to Florida. The Tennessee-Florida game, obviously always a big deal.
A very big deal. This year, no different.
No truth that you can see Neyland Stadium from the shuttle. No truth to that.
I'm shocked.
I know, it's incredible. Yes, indeed. In a few days, Knoxville is going to be the home to thousands of folks from the Gator Nation. Tennessee fans and Florida fans pumped up for the game. But what do the players think? We head to campus and to Gainesville next.
Tonight on a special edition of Nightline, Battlefield Wilderness on the front lines with U.S. troops in Afghanistan, where 5 years after 9/11, a tenacious enemy is making a troubling comeback. Is the other war getting out of control? 9/11 ER, the little hospital that was overwhelmed by the wounded and the fearful when the towers fell. It may never fully recover. Could our hospitals cope with another terror attack? And aftermath. On this 5th anniversary, a bold new look at the towers in ruins just after they fell. Destruction like never before, captured on camera, seared into memory.
From the global resources of ABC News, with Terry Moran in Kabul, Afghanistan, and Martin Bashir and Cynthia McFadden in New York City, this is Nightline, September 11, 2006.
Hello, I'm Terry Moran reporting from Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, where it's the morning of September 12th here. This is where it began. This is where the plot to attack America was born 5 years ago. That day changed both countries and linked our destiny as Americans to that of the people here. It was a day of remembrance in both countries, of anger and sorrow and reflection. President Bush spoke to the American people tonight, and in that speech, he promised to complete some unfinished business here. He vowed once again to bring Osama bin Laden to justice. But bin Laden remains at large, and the war here has proved to be far tougher and more complex than the commander-in-chief likely anticipated when he launched it 5 years ago. A full moon shines over the mountains of the Hindu Kush, and an American night patrol heads out on the hunt for Al-Qaeda.
Anytime I leave this area, to me it's kind of risky. You know, especially when it's just me and my 7 guys, we go out there. You know, you never know what's going to happen. All right, let's go.
5 years after the 9/11 attacks, this small patrol in a forbidding land is one facet of the American struggle to defeat a surprisingly tenacious and elusive enemy.
Al-Qaeda's always been there. They're there now. And the valley is huge. It's just like this. The terrain is very extreme and very severe, and there's a lot of places for them to hide. They've got a lot of support down in the Corn Gulf from the locals.
Captain Robert Stanton commands 200 American soldiers stationed across 3 small bases along the remote Pesh River Valley of eastern Afghanistan, not far from the porous border with Pakistan. Conditions here are Spartan. Combat is never far away.
It was bad, dude. And then on top of that, I got mortared while I was on guard.
Just up the valley, American artillery shells Al-Qaeda strongholds.
We're directly involved in the war on terror here, and the people that we fight are direct descendants of the people that committed the attack on the U.S. during 9/11.
Oh, say, can you see?
You hear 9/11 mentioned a lot by the U.S. troops in Afghanistan. They seem to draw strength of purpose from it. Across this country today, they pause to remember the attacks on the U.S. that brought them here. Staff Sergeant Alicia Watkins was in the Pentagon when it was attacked.
I recognize what type of stock that we come from. I recognize the strength and the courage that flows through American blood.
General Carl Eikenberry, the commander of all U.S. forces in Afghanistan, was in the Pentagon too.
It felt a tremendous shock. I was thrown against the wall in the aircraft that struck the Pentagon. Terry literally passed underneath my office. Very fortunate to be alive.
5 years later, Eikenberry offers a cautious assessment of where things stand in Afghanistan today.
We are winning, but I'll also say we have not yet won.
And could still lose?
Terry, we're losing is not an option in Afghanistan.
And so there is no choice but to fight, and the fighting in places is ferocious. In the south of the country, pitched battles rage every day between NATO forces and a Taliban insurgency whose renewed strength and ferocity have taken Allied commanders by surprise. In Helmand and Kandahar provinces, the Taliban are in control of large swaths of territory, and they've seized or attacked other areas across the border from Pakistan, where they have found a sanctuary.
Terry, there's towns around here where the people are absolutely terrorized, and they're going to support the Taliban. And there are also towns, villages, and areas that are Taliban. They have always been Taliban.
We helicoptered into the battle zone with Major General Benjamin Frickley, the U.S. operational commander in Afghanistan.
Osama bin Laden, when he gave the go-ahead for September 11, 2001, did not believe that America was morally bankrupt and we would not fight. He had no signs of American resolve. He made a mistake. You know what the Japanese say? Beware the sleeping giant.
But American resolve, General Frickley insists, has to be demonstrated by far more than military power. Winning in Afghanistan, he argues, means proving to Afghans that they will have a better life without the Taliban.
So if you have security, the second thing you want is some sort of economic growth, something better. That, you know, okay, I'm secure, so can I bring my crops in this year? Can I keep some of my crops and sell some of my crops? Will you help me have a better irrigation plan? That crucial aspect of the war is fought one province, one village at a time.
This is the village of Dilla in Paktika province. Just a few days ago, the Taliban were in control of this. American military moved in a firefight, pushed the Taliban out. Now they're trying to establish some kind of local government, some buy-in, as they say, from the people here into the American presence, and beyond that, the Afghan government itself. This, in a microcosm, is the struggle in Afghanistan as a whole.
As soon as the U.S. took this village back from the Taliban, they brought the provincial governor down to meet the tribal elders. He promised help, but only if the villagers helped keep the Taliban away. And he summed up his war succinctly for us.
Who's winning the war here? You and the American allies you have, or the Taliban?
We are winning. We have a lot of advantage. Like, we build the schools. Taliban burned the schools. Who is the winner? We give benefit for the people. Taliban take everything from the people. Who is the winners? We give security for them, and they take security for the people. And who is the winner? We are the winner.
But all that, from combat operations to reconstruction to shepherding a fledgling democracy, that takes manpower, boots on the ground, and American commanders clearly need more.
You are responsible for how much of Afghanistan?
Regional Command East, which is 27,000 square miles, 10 provinces of eastern Afghanistan with 600 miles of border with Pakistan.
27,000 square miles. How many soldiers are under your command?
We have about 4,500 to 5,000 soldiers on any given day.
Is that enough?
We choose where we want to achieve effects, and where we want to achieve effects, it's enough.
That's not really saying it is enough for 27,000 square miles, is it?
Well, any soldier always likes more resources.
Back up in the mountains, American soldiers, inspired by the memory of 9/11, are pressing on, fighting and building in this harsh land. And they know there is still a long way to go on the road to victory.
In my opinion, the sacrifices is worth it in Afghanistan. Now, whether or not we're winning or losing, American forces will never lose a war through like you say, casualties. It'll only be through the loss of hope, loss of support from the home. So what we're doing here, it's going to take a while. It's going to take some patience, but I mean, we're neck and neck with the Afghan people. We've got a mutual concern in seeing this through.
One thing we've heard from Americans and Afghans here, this is a critical moment. This is a moment where all the progress that has been achieved, and there is a lot, this is a bustling city here, it could all be lost unless the international community puts more boots on the ground and more dollars in the pipeline to rebuild this shattered land. And now we're going to go to my colleague Cynthia McFadden, who's in New York. Cynthia?
Thank you, Terry, and good evening from ABC News headquarters here in New York City, where today Americans and visitors from around the world mark the 5th anniversary of the September attacks that changed its soul and its skyline forever. We'll have more on New York's anniversary when we continue. First, with the traumatized ER, overwhelmed by the wounded and the terrified in the turmoil of 9/11. Would the nation's hospitals be ready for another attack? And among the ruins, a remarkable look at the wreckage of the trade towers just after they fell. Unforgettable destruction, frozen in time.
Nightline continues from New York City with Cynthia McFadden.
The story of a little hospital that could and did make an enormous difference in the wake of September 11th, saving dozens of lives that might well have been lost, mending the bodies that had been broken. New York's downtown hospital, just 3 blocks from the towers, was the only light still on that night within the shadow of where the towers stood in the morning. But would other hospitals around the country be ready if disaster strikes again? Tonight, looking backward to look forward.
It was quiet. You know, after the first plane hit, right then there were a few minutes of quiet. And then all hell broke loose.
What happened?
A mob of people came down the street, rushing into the hospital. You know, many bloody, battered, broken arms, lacerations, people being carried in.
And as the people are coming down,
and the people
crying?
People were terrified, crying, streaming into the emergency department.
Caught up in the smoke and debris, the noise and chaos that swept over lower Manhattan 5 years ago today was a small hospital, New York Downtown Hospital, just 3 blocks from Ground Zero. The hospital specializes in elective surgery. Its emergency room not one of the city's high-level trauma centers.
I know in the first 2 hours we formally treated 350. The place was literally a mob scene.
At the end of a normal day, Dr. Tony DeHeer and his ER team would have seen 100 patients. By the end of this day, they had seen 1,500. For the first few critical hours after the towers were hit, this hospital became ground zero for medical care. So how did the little hospital downtown cope with the largest terrorist attack in American history? 5 years later, the memories are still overwhelming.
We didn't have very specialized disaster equipment. We simply did what we know how to do, and that was enough. That sufficed. The thing I'm proudest about on 9/11 is we didn't miss a patient. It was my nightmare that, sorry.
5 years later.
It's weird. Yeah, that we didn't miss a patient, that we thought that, again, if someone had told me that a patient bled out in the corner or something that we had missed, it would have been a nightmare.
Can we do it in NS?
No, it's got to be D5.
Oh, shoot. He's diabetic, so
Dr. David Goldschmidt was the head of the emergency room on 9/11. He says, though small, his hospital was actually well prepared for what happened.
We're not a typical hospital. 1993, the World Trade Center bombing all came here. Now, that was about 345 patients. So we knew that we had the potential to have it happen again. We went through special training. We went through getting special equipment. We were focused on how to run a disaster and how to take this hospital with a small emergency department and raise our capacity.
Many experts worry about whether the 5,000 other hospitals in this country would be ready if disaster strikes again. Do hospitals have the right kind of resources, do you think?
I think unfortunately, mostly hospitals are on their own. There has been, of course, some federal and state aid, but mostly you're on your own. Your disaster planning and your disaster resources are from your own budget. And I think what people don't understand is, and this is obviously my bias, by strengthening hospitals in general, just making them well-staffed, well-stocked, financially viable, that's the best disaster preparation.
Experts like Dr. Redliner estimate it will take up to $5 billion to bring hospitals up to speed.
We have barely functioning hospital systems in many parts of the country that would get overwhelmed within hours of a major catastrophe because there isn't any flex room. We've thinned down the hospital system, tried to take out the fat to save money, and now we're going to pay a price for a very disorganized system that doesn't work very well to begin with.
The Department of Homeland Security's had about $3 billion to give to first responders. About 4% of that money went to hospitals. Does that make sense to you?
No. At the beginning, hospitals were not even considered anything to do with the trauma, anything to do with the disaster, anything to do with the mass casualty. We had no title. We were considered non-responders. Now we are considered first receivers. We have never gotten to the point of a first responder status. Therefore, you don't have first responder status, you don't get the funding.
So most hospitals, in your estimation, are not as prepared as this one.
No, not at all. They can't be. It's too expensive.
So does that make sense to you?
No, it's one of the things that's worried me tremendously is that the hospitals have been ignored.
New York Downtown Hospital reopened a new emergency room this past week, but not one dime of the cost has come from public money. For the doctors who were there that day, it is important that the lessons of 9/11 not be forgotten. How well did your staff here work together as a team during 9/11?
Beyond anything I could have imagined. Our housekeepers, for instance, that when these very badly injured patients came in, doctors just throw things around. It's as if a bomb goes off in the room. There's blood everywhere. There's supplies everywhere. People throw things around. They're tearing through supply kits to get at what they need. We would get those patients stabilized, get them out to the operating rooms, and another patient would come in. In those 3 or 4 minutes between patients, the housekeepers would have the room spotless. If you had told me that was possible, I would have said you're crazy. And people rise to the occasion.
It was that day, it was the best and the worst of what you see in human beings.
Right. That's exactly how I feel about it, is that it really did show me the best in people. And it sounds a horrible cliche, but it really, until you see it, you really can't understand it. Where I turned, I knew that everybody behind me was going to do exactly the right thing and that I could trust everybody down the line. It's an astonishing feeling.
A final note, the downtown hospital lost millions and millions of dollars as a result of 9/11, money the hospital still has not fully recouped. Even the best and most talented people, they say, need adequate resources to do their jobs. So far, the resources the nation's hospitals need have been slow in coming. And when we come back, portraits of total destruction, a unique look at the ruins of the trade towers. To an eyewitness who found hope among the ruins, capturing history through his lens. 5 years ago, a determined photographer talked his way into the smoldering ashes of Ground Zero. The pictures he took are so telling, so evocative, they're now part of New York's official 9/11 archive. We first caught up with Joel Meyerowitz 6 months after 9/11. Now his work is being published in a new book entitled, fittingly, Aftermath.
I wasn't exactly the official photographer of Ground Zero when I began. I was just a citizen who had a sense of hopelessness and helplessness after the event. But when I heard that no photographs were allowed, I suddenly realized that that meant no history would be recorded, and I decided that's what I could do to be helpful. I tried when I went into Ground Zero to be as transparent as I could so that whoever looked at these pictures could stand in my shoes, if that was possible, and look through me out into the site and have a visceral connection to a place they couldn't go to. It was the Forbidden City. There's so many pictures. There's one in particular, and it's a picture of a man on his hands and knees. He should have gone home already, but he's still on his hands and knees looking at 1 square foot of earth, brushing it, looking for a bone or a tooth or some identifying object. And that was the quality that I saw over and over again, from the days when the pile was 7 stories above ground to when it was an empty pit at bedrock in Manhattan. And it was, in that way, mythic, in a sense. I was walking around in the bottom, and something caught my eye. It was a glove or a piece of newspaper on the ground, and I just looked down to see what it was, and I noticed next to it some grass. New, tender shoots of grass were growing up next to the railroad track, and I realized these tracks were covered in darkness for 35 years. And now it had been exposed to sunlight and rain and warmth, and suddenly these seeds had renewed themselves. And I thought, here, At the bottom of ground zero, below sea level, this grass was returning to life, and it was an emblem of hope.
The photographer Joel Meyerowitz and his photographs. And when we come back, some remarkable women 5 years later. Tomorrow on Nightline, more from Terry Moran, live from Afghanistan, with the story of some women whose lives have been transformed since the fall of the Taliban, and some women whose lives remain unchanged. That's tomorrow on Nightline, and that's our report for tonight. I'm Cynthia McFadden. For Terry, Martin Bashir, and all of us at ABC News, good night, America.